lovelies. Happy New Year! Let me know if you're on Facebook. Let me know if you can hear me, okay? Because last time the audio was a bit weird. So let me know once you're here if you can hear me and that you're with me. Hello, dear one. Welcome. How are we doing? Welcome to another self-love sermon. It's been a couple of weeks. It's been a nice, peaceful, pleasurable, restful Yuletide holiday here in the Guilford household, and it was so sweet to take some rest for myself. And I am really, really honored to be here again with all of you and to be running January of Pleasure, to be inside this beautiful community, this beautiful challenge, this container of a month-long journey of pleasure practice, building a sustainable pleasure practice. Happy New Year, Holly! Welcome! Yeah, and I've got to say, today is day 5 of the January of Pleasure Challenge, and I'm going to talk about what that is if you don't know. And already I feel so transformed by my pleasure practice, by the intentionality with which I am bringing pleasure activity into my life. And I know I've talked on self-love sermons about pleasure in the past, but I've never integrated an intentional pleasure practice until now, until this challenge. So let's get into it. We're gonna get more into the nitty-gritty tonight. Hi Claire, hi Micah, hello, hi Kelsey. Welcome, dear ones, on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, and anyone else who might be viewing, just so you know, I'm Ellen Gilbert. I'm a Divine Feminine Self-Love Coach. I define Divine Feminine Self-Love as the shameless pursuit of rest, pleasure, and community. And pleasure, to me, is the most radical of these three. And we are running right now January of Pleasure. It is a month-long challenge. Let me share the link here. If you haven't joined us yet, it's not too late. You can join at any time. There's no falling behind. There's no homework. There's no Facebook group. You do what you wish when you wish. That's like the number one ground rule, is what do you consent to? What is your body telling you it not only needs but desires? And every Sunday I'm sending out 7 pleasure practices and 7 reflection prompts you can do at any time throughout the week or create your own. And then every Friday evening, so starting this Friday, the 8th of January, we're gonna circle together as a community of pleasure practicers. And we're gonna swap stories from the week. We're gonna swap reflections, shadows, learnings, how we shifted that week, how pleasure has spilled from our practice into other areas of our lives, and what wisdom and medicine and fruits it has brought us. So I'm really excited, to talk more candidly about pleasure. And tonight is the first in a series of pleasure sermons we're going to be doing in January in honor of our pleasure practice challenge. So today we do kick it off with this theme of why. Why should you start a pleasure practice? There are so many reasons. We're going to get into it. And of course, I'll walk you through what a pleasure practice looks like so you can start your own. As always, a reminder that I'm live here every Tuesday-ish. I give myself a lot of space at this time, 8 p.m. Eastern. And you're invited to show up and practice with us. And if you do feel a shift from tonight, or if something really sticks out to you, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna keep that in my pocket. That's something I really benefited from. I invite you to make a donation and create an exchange, a web of reciprocity with me in my work as a self-love coach. Yeah, that would be great. Okay. So good to be here with all of you. Let's start with lighting our candle. Sometimes I forget, so I want to do that before I forget. And if you have a candle, just breathing it in, or maybe grabbing essential oils if that's your thing. Taking a moment for um, this this pleasure of scent. One of our five senses. And as we light the candle, I invite you to ground into your intention. Why are you here? You know, what drew you to this circle? And what do you want to get out of this discussion about pleasure? How do you want to feel in your body when it's over? Maybe you come here for some midweek relief, midweek connection. And I do want you to know you are part of our community. You are not alone. So use the chat and say hi and share your questions and reflections. But as you light your candle, setting your own intention for the next hour. And it is my intention that you unfurl the petals of your tightly wound flower bud and blossom fully into receiving pleasure, receiving abundance, receiving good things as an acknowledgement of your worthiness. And even though my candle just went out, that has nothing to do with my intention. I'm going to light another one. Oh, that one bit the dust. I burned 90% of my candles on the solstice, and I desperately need more. Precious ones. All right. I lost you for a second. Here we are. Holly's lit. Claire's looking for connection and knowledge. Yes. Holly, intention is to rid pleasure of shame. This is what it is all about. You are spot on. And that's why we say the shameless pursuit, because we're living in a frickin' shame culture, and the antidote of shame is shamelessness, and shameless pleasure is like, woo, radical. Radical. Micah's here to hold space for herself. Yes, you are worthy, precious one. So good to be with you. Let's awaken our bodies a bit, because one thing's for sure, we have to have our body to experience pleasure. As far as we know, we need to light it up, wake it up, get in it. Sometimes we drop in through our meditation, sometimes we drop in through movement, and sometimes we drop in through a little bit of body touching, so tapping, massaging, shaking, holding. And I want you to explore what feels good for you. If you would like to be guided, I'm going to do some combination of tapping and holding and massaging, to let my body know that it is safe. I'm going to close my eyes and check in with my heart first. There's some real tenderness present here in this body tonight, but a sweet tenderness. I'm in the maiden phase of my cycle, which is the inner spring, the pre-ovulatory phase, and we're here at the dawn of a new year. And I'm feeling excited and new and fresh as a daisy, but also a bit vulnerable, a bit tender. How are you? Ask your body and your heart as you just begin to kind of say hello in whatever way feels right. Maybe some gentle tapping around the collarbone, the heart, the sternum. Hello. Hello, body. I feel you. You are safe. You can relax. I know I am worthy. You can repeat these words if you wish. I know I am worthy. I trust I am enough. I love myself. If you don't have a tapping practice, you can follow along. There's a few points, a few acupressure points that help us relax. That's all it is. There's nothing fancy going on. Pleasure is safe. I am safe. Incorporate the breath. I know I'm worthy. I'm not alone. Let's forget the crown of the head. I am a boundless being of love and light. Pleasure is my birthright. I am releasing shame. I am receiving abundance. Beautiful. Wherever you are, bringing the hands together at heart center. Take a deep breath in through the nose, filling the lungs. And out through the nose or mouth, your choice. Extending that exhale. Letting the breath come to normal. Bringing a smile to the lips, why not? Letting it all go. Welcome back, precious ones. You can take your time rejoining our circle. Such sweet words that were channeled for me to share with you tonight, and it's really helpful to have a pleasure mantra. It's really helpful to have mantras, period, strings of words that you say to yourself even when you don't feel like they're true, and paying attention to how they become true over time and that felt sense of truth in the body, and with pleasure. Yeah, it can be really healing and a good reminder to come up with some pleasure mantras. If you've got a pleasure mantra, put it in the chat. I would love to hear it and share it with you. Okay, beautiful ones. I would love a check-in, so let me know if it feels safe to share. And if it's clear to you, like, what is your relationship to pleasure right now? And I love working with scales. So like 0 to 10, 0 being like, it is a fraught relationship. I don't have any of it in my life and I'm really terrified of it. 10 being like, I am as filled as I possibly can be. My cup overfloweth with pleasure. I have no problems asking for what I want. Like, where are you on that scale? Or if you want to use words instead of numbers to kind of describe, because Hmm. I'm feeling like I'm opening to my pleasure for the first time in my life. And it took a lot of groundwork to be laid, you know? It took my feminist education in my liberal arts college combined with, my feminist mystic religion and spirituality combined with so many life experiences. Um, to get me to where I am. So I would love to know where others are on their pleasure journey, others that are here with us tonight. Is it something you want more of? Is it something you feel pretty satisfied with? Is it something that you're not super interested in right now, but maybe you're here because you want to learn more? Yeah, I would love to hear. So why should we start a pleasure practice? That's what we're talking about tonight. First of all, what the hell is it? It's become a very trendy topic. You can follow the hashtag pleasure practice, and it's interesting because you'll see lots of pictures of people. Maybe they bought themselves something, or they're indulging in some wine or some chocolate, and that's great. I love all of that. Maybe they're taking a bath, but like we've talked about before, self-care doesn't cost a thing, and neither does pleasure. So keep that in mind. Um, and yeah, it doesn't cost a thing. It doesn't have to be shared. It doesn't have to be shared on social media to count as a pleasure practice. I can't believe I have to say that nowadays, but I do want to say that. Great, thank you for sharing. Holly, shame is just a big block. I'm probably a 4. Yeah, oof, yes. Micah, 2 or 2.5. Yes, working on it. I'm working on my relationship to self in general, not gaslighting myself into not meeting my needs. Yes, that makes sense, Micah. Absolutely, that makes sense. Beautiful one. It is a beautiful pathway to knowing yourself more, being your own soulmate, and we're going to talk about all that. Beautiful. Okay, so pleasure. Literally, pleasure is like good vibrations, feeling good, positive feelings in the body, felt sensations. Um, it can also happen in the brain, as we know, like sex happens in the brain. A lot of stories can bring pleasure and positive feelings, right? So it can be this brain body connection. It can feel like a spiritual experience, which some, myself included, might argue our body is our spirit portal. Without our body, we don't know that we have spirit for sure, but we do know we can experience spiritual connection, chemical reactions in the body, nervous system changes through the body. Um, and so it's this felt sense of goodness. It just feels good. It could be a sense of fulfillment or satisfaction or a full body yes. Like ultimate pleasure to me is like full body yes. So what does that require? It requires getting into our bodies, right? And it can help bring us into our bodies. On the other end of that, when we stop pushing away pleasure, when we stop being afraid of pleasure, when we stop making up narratives about morality and pleasure, when we stop creating shame narratives around pleasure, or stop taking them in, accepting them as truth, and when we start challenging those narratives, and we start asking for pleasure in our lives, whether from ourselves or from others. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, Holly, about how pleasure is a sexual word. It has a sexual connotation in our culture. And for you, it creates a block because it's a messy area. Abso-freaking-lutely. I'm so glad you brought this up because there's pleasure, which I think of as like this umbrella term, which to me is like the five sense experience, whether it's taste, touch, smell, something visual, or something auditory like beautiful music. And then there's eros and erotica, and there's sexual pleasure, which falls under that umbrella of pleasure. So I think of that as a subset of pleasure, right? But it's not the whole story. It's not the whole story. So we're really done a disservice when we make it the whole story. And you pointed out so beautifully, when shame gets wrapped around any part of our story making in our mind, there's intense attachment created. And our ego loves it, because our ego loves to tell us how we're separate, how we're bad, how we're different. Um, and you might have experienced this shame as an inner critic, as imposter syndrome, as a creative block if you're a creative person. Um, that's internalized shame, okay? So it wraps around this word, pleasure, and it pulls it down into this shameful, dark, cavernous place and says, this is bad. Um, but in reality, we need to look at that, don't we? And like you said, why is it a messy area? Why is talking about sex so shameful? I did a deep dive on this today for myself, and I journaled a lot around, like, why I think we do need some social norms around sex, why we obviously need consent, why we need safe sex, why we need sex positivity, um, because we don't want some of the negative repercussions. But the morality and the shame that gets tied to sex actually creates more dysfunction, dis-ease, and problems in our society. So it's really ironic how the very things that maybe religion or our families have given us to quote unquote protect us from like the negative outcomes of sex actually get distorted into the very thing that creates those negative outcomes, which is abstinence only sex education, um, sex education that doesn't prioritize consent, um, and the list goes on and on and on. So I think it's fascinating. And that's not all pleasure is, right? It is, however, a huge part of the healing we need to do as a culture. In order to come home to our wholeness, we absolutely need to do our own sexual healing as a culture. We need to embrace talking about this topic, talking about shame, talking about consent, talking about health, all of these things. And I'm absolutely in that category of people that need to do some healing there. I mean, I would struggle to find anyone that isn't in that category, personally. Okay, so this is pleasure. Beautiful. Claire, I feel I'm taking me time for my own pleasure hurts the family because they need me, but I'm working on just doing it together. Oh, that's beautiful, Claire. Yes, yes, yes. The guilt and the shame, the disconnection, the feeling of, well, this is luxurious or this is selfish. That comes up a lot. But actually, how much do they benefit when you do prioritize your own pleasure, right? When it's a pleasure filled home, a joyful home, and doing it together, that's beautiful. Yes, Kimberly, agreed. I feel selfish, so I try to integrate them. I love that. All right, precious one. So we've covered what pleasure is. A pleasure practice is committing to exploring pleasure each day. It can be as long or short as you wish of an activity. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's an hour. Maybe you really are basing it on where you are in your cycle, what your energy level is, how much time you have. Um, and maybe you're just looking for pleasure in more mundane activities, the magic in the mundane, right? Maybe you don't even need to like structure it or make it this chore of a thing, because that's just going to totally kill the joy in it for you, it requires courage because you have to make these rules, these guidelines for yourself. And that takes a lot of courage. If you haven't joined January of Pleasure, though, I would really recommend it because I do give you the prompts, and that can be really, um, that can feel safe for a lot of people to have that container to be held in. But to me, that practice, the pleasure practice, you know, it's just for you. You don't have to share it with anyone. It's about approaching pleasure in a way that is mindful and embodied, both mindful and embodied. So instead of, like, yesterday, we had a mindful lotion application. That was the one I did from the prompt list. And instead of like having my podcast on, getting out of the shower and just doing my like routine of putting on lotion for the purpose of moisturizing my skin in this desert where I live, I had to slow way down. I had to remember my intention. Okay, why do I want to put this on mindfully? Okay, what does that look like? I had to get quiet, make this space, and then actually, experience the lotion I was working with, or if you're working with an object, whatever tool, like noticing it, seeing it, smelling it, feeling it, and then putting it on your body. It was an incredible invitation for me, and I already do like oil massage every week or 2 weeks. A lot of, as you know and have seen, a lot of tapping and self massage. But to do this with the lotion was like an added layer of, oh yeah, I can use this to check in. How is my body? How are my shoulders? How does it feel to infuse my lotion with love and with pleasure and with good feelings for myself? And it was so sweet and so simple, and that's what I want to share with you. It can be so freaking simple. It brings meaning and beauty into our lives. And so, staying curious throughout, staying a partner with your own experience throughout, so before, during, and after the pleasure practice is key. Um, like, really curious, like, why am I resisting this in the beginning? And then that point where you let go. Um, and then what it felt like after. Was it a release? Was it a buzzing? Was there shame? Sometimes that happens. Um, do you want to do it again? How would you do it differently? How can you bring more of it if it was positive? All the stories you're telling yourself, you bring this in and you reflect afterwards. And so, keeping a pleasure diary. If you're in January of Pleasure, I give you some great prompts and a log to use to help do those check ins because it's really important to understand the shifts. Okay, checking back in with the chat. Kimberly, this is neat. I've never tried this. It was a lot of positivity. I needed it. I need to open my mind to find the good. Oh, precious one. You are so welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Micah, a block I run into is what being in my body doesn't always feel safe. Yes, yes. And pleasure, absolutely. Sometimes it will help with that and remind the body, okay, it's safe to be here. Not every experience in my body has to be met with pain or shame or the heaviness or the grief. Um, Sometimes it can feel good, and sometimes with the pleasure practice, it's just the dropping in, that point of release, that point of really dropping in and letting it happen doesn't happen. And sometimes it doesn't happen. But the practice, the word practice means we stay in partnership with our experience. We have the courage and the sheer grit to remain present with the experience, whatever it is, and not judging it. Yeah, good point. All right. So, some more context here. So, why we need a self love practice? Well, we need it, or why we need a pleasure practice. We need it because of self love, like you said, Micah, getting to know ourselves better. We need it because we need to do necessary sexual healing, body shame healing specifically. We need to do it because of cultural harm that the shame culture we live under has done and perpetuated and created. We need to do it for social justice. And it is a spiritual process because your body is the spirit portal. So if that's something you're longing for, curious about, it can be a portal for that for you. So, number one, I did a sermon a few months back, one of the early days, on pleasure as embodied gratitude. So, you've probably heard gratitude practice, so important, so wonderful. Yes, I like to interrupt this, if God is not external but right here. Okay, this is the divine embodied. Number one, if that's true, we have to honor our freaking bodies. Number two, gratitude isn't about sending pleasure or sending, sorry, gratitude is not about sending our thanks to some external divine God figure. Okay? Gratitude has intrinsic, inherent value. And we can send that to whatever divine you do or don't conceptualize through living a life of pleasure. And what do I mean by this? I'll just quickly say, if you give someone a gift, how do you want them to react? You might not even care if they say thank you. You want to see them rip that thing open and go to town. Start playing with it, right? You want to see if it's a beautiful piece of jewelry, which someone on this attending this sermon may or may not have given me. I love it so much. Thank you, Claire. Um, if you give someone a piece of jewelry, you want to see them wear it. You want to see them enjoy it. So, what better way to show our gratitude than by living a life of pleasure, by feeling the blessings we receive and signaling to the universe, hey, more where this came from, more goodness. Like attracts like, right? So, what better way than being receptive and open? And if you do believe in God, that's what God wants. Like, God wants us to live lives of embodied pleasure. Can I get an amen? Okay. It also, pleasure helps us create a container to practice all these beautiful divine feminine things: mindfulness, slowness, stillness, right? We create space in a pleasure practice. We create this beautiful structure within which we get to practice and embody peace and love. So that's just beautiful. And it can be so short. Thank you, Holly. Amen. We also get to explore what we like and what we don't like. And especially as women, as non binaries, as people of color, as anyone that doesn't fit that white male cis hetero paradigm, uh, to explore what we like and what we don't is it's a practice in consent. It's a practice in developing what our yes and what our no feels like. And that's super important and super radical in a rape culture. So to be able to figure out, oh yeah, that's what I want. And I can tell because my body reacts in this way. Or, oh no, that's not what I want. And I can tell because my body reacts in this way. A pleasure practice can give you those tools, can give you that map. And it's no one else's job to explore that but yours in the beginning and then with every partners you have. So yeah, um, all right. And this is a quote. So I am reading right now Pleasure Activism. Highly recommend Adrienne Marie Brown. So good. It's like a collection of essays and interviews, and it's fantastic. She says, Oh, this is with an interview with Ingrid LaFleur. I believe every moment of every day should be a pleasurable experience. If it is not, then it is time to question what is happening and why you decided to endure it. Ultimately, love for the self is the deepest pleasure we deny ourselves. I work daily to be courageous enough to indulge in the purest pleasure of self love. Just let those words sink in. Feels like warm water going down my spine. There's just a knowing. Yes, ultimately, self love is the deepest pleasure we deny ourselves. I work daily to be courageous enough to indulge in the purest pleasure of self love. What does that mean to you? It's this practice in knowing ourselves and in loving ourselves, which requires, as you know, curiosity. Curiosity. And pleasure is a curious adventure. It's an experiment. It's a wild ride. And that freaking requires courage. You are so worthy and so capable. Okay? So, what else? It's very short and convenient to develop a pleasure practice. And you probably already are numbing out, escaping in some way, in some routine way. You are trying to fill the void of silence, of stillness. You're trying to silence the inner critic, the ego. You're trying to get away from what's uncomfortable. Okay? What if we took that and we brought intention to our pleasure? What if we followed that breadcrumb trail of how we're trying to escape and said, wait, 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 wait. I can actually experience beautiful pleasure, experience abundance, entertainment, wonder, connection, joy, and be freaking present for it. And actually, when I do that, it's more sustainable. It's like the difference between mindlessly binging some trashy show, which, trust me, I have been there, and intentionally watching like 10 minutes of something that you're present for, you're engaged with, you learn so much. It's a full body experience. You know, it's just efficient to to experience intentional pleasure versus mindless numbing and escaping. It takes less time and it lasts longer. The benefits are greater. So play with that experiment as well. Um, and if another reason, a pleasure practice is a healing mechanism, as we've said, for sexual and body shame. Okay, this is from Audre Lorde's essay, Uses of the Erotic. She says, the erotic is a measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. I love that word chaos because it's like it requires courage. When you're going into the erotic, that requires courage. That feels chaotic, right? We're out of control, and giving up control can be really hard. Um, so she says, the erotic is a measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. It is an internal sense of satisfaction to which, once we have experienced it, we know we can aspire. For having experienced the fullness of this depth of feelings and recognizing its power, in honor of self respect, we can require no less of ourselves. Isn't that so beautiful? She's like, I think what she's saying is once you've experienced the fullness of your freaking pleasure, you can't deny it. In order to really, to love and respect and honor yourself, you have to keep being open to receiving it and working at it. And so she really equates eroticism specifically with self respect. And I love that. Hmm. It also, we drop into the body, so we activate the parasympathetic. And that's where rest and digestion and healing happens. So it's a way to rewire that nervous system and remember that pleasure is safe. And when we can bring this patterning in, we can use that across many areas of our life, not just pleasure. So Holly says, why do we feel safe watching other people experience pleasure like on TV, but not on our own? Oh, yes. And it's the same with porn. That's what that makes me think of. Absolutely. It can feel like a total drop in versus having to actually be in the body, which can feel really scary. And I'm sure there's some great neuroscience that I do not know. But I think that's a really great question, Holly, and it definitely does. Kimberly, I've never heard of a pleasure mantra, so what would that sound like? Yeah, so that would be like what I was saying as we were tapping, if you were here for that, Kimberly, was saying things like pleasure is safe. I am worthy of pleasure. Um, there's nothing shameless about, or there's nothing shameful about pleasure. Um, or, pleasure is fun. Things like that. Yeah, great question. Micah, Audre Lorde has also written about the power of eroticism if you haven't read it. Yeah, yeah. Did you write that before I read that? um, so, yeah. So, we've been talking about why to start a pleasure practice from kind of the realms of the personal. But if we zoom out, pleasure is also for the community, right? Nothing happens in a vacuum here in divine feminine love. It necessarily includes the planet, all people, which include animal people and plant people, all beings everywhere, right? So, how does our pleasure connect to their abundance, you know? And how does that fight against shame culture? And in case you're not familiar with what I mean by shame culture, I'm using it as a catch all for patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, and colonialism, which all have in their own right, they should be named. But in my opinion, what unites these things is that they profit off of our shame, you know? And our shame is what keeps those who are shakily holding on to their power on top of their fragile little pedestals. The shame is the thing that keeps them in power, and it keeps the status quo, and it makes sure we don't rock the boat. And when we claim our pleasure, and remember, it's our pleasure, our rest, and our community. But tonight we're talking all about pleasure, which I do feel is the most radical. When we claim our pleasure, we topple that shaky pedestal. You know? We completely break down that system of power over. And we bring abundance into our bodies, which also there's like new realms and depths of wisdom there, just been hiding out and waiting to be tapped into. And it all works together to negate that culture, that mindset of scarcity, that there's not enough to go around, so we have to, extract from the planet. We have to overconsume and waste. It's a dog eat dog world. And instead of that culture of scarcity, pleasure helps us claim a culture of abundance. So, so pleasure is like, to me, one of the coolest weapons against shame culture. And you really got to go all in. It's just like with self love. And right now I'm reading The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. Um, Freaking fabulous cover. Highly recommend it as well. Um, I mean, just the title, right? The body's not an apology. Hello, that's what we're freaking talking about. So body shame absolutely falls into our pleasure work. Pleasure can be the great healer of body shame, that gateway, but also that medicine. It's the food our bodies have been starving for. It's it's every it can be um, such beautiful nourishment for body shame. And again, it requires courage. But she says her main premise with the body is not an apology is that self-love doesn't start and end with us. You know, it necessarily includes all bodies because bodies are the great equalizer. We all have bodies, you know, and we're taught to try to get out of them and escape and numb them and shame them into wrong and bad as soon as we can. You know, we're taught this. But if we can instead radically accept and love our bodies and then claim our pleasure, then that has to include us all fighting together for the equality of all bodies, right? And the ability of all peoples to not only get what they need in their bodies, but to get what they want. Yeah. All right, I love this topic so much. I could just talk and talk and talk on it. Um, Pleasure is also that's how it's an act of social justice. Yeah, and it's gonna help us take down the beauty and diet industrial complex. So when we really embrace our pleasure, we don't have to hustle for our worthiness anymore through the male gaze. You know, we don't have to say, "Oh, when I receive this gift of male protection or the male gaze, which the patriarchy peddles to us, um, when I no longer have to do that, it's because I am giving myself that validation. It's my own gaze." um, and that necessarily will topple the beauty and diet industrial complex, which profits endlessly on our attachment to male gaze, our rejection of our bodies, our fear of pleasure, and our shame mentality. And so she says in The Body's Not an Apology, there's a reason we hate our bodies. It isn't because of Curtis, our mamas, or even our low self esteem. I don't know who Curtis is. She says, we are saddled with body shame because it is an age old system whose roots and pockets are deep. Body shame flourishes in our world because profit and power depend on it. Yeah, just like we were talking about shame. So, just a couple quick stats on the body shame profit complex, as she calls it. The average American woman spends $15,000 on beauty products over the course of her lifetime. $15,000. And 2 years ago, the United States, just the United States diet industry, hit a record breaking $72 billion in worth. $72 billion. You know, I just get angry. What good could we do in this world with $72 billion? You know? And what would women do? You know, if truly, if we divested from such harmful, shame inducing industries. And look, I am all for self adornment and beauty practices as a part of my pleasure work. And detangling that from the body shame profit complex is part of my life's work and my journey and my practice, and it's messy. Um, Hmm. And, you know, I'm so over it. I'm so over being sold this lie that my body is bad and shameful and dirty and wrong. And so are my desires, the desires of my body. And I know I'm not the only one. Yeah, Micah, burn the diet industry to the ground. Absolutely. Ugh, okay. So, pleasure, it can help us claim our consent, claim our yes and our no, transform ourselves from an object for the male gaze, an object to be consumed, to an agent of our own desire, an agent of our own freedom, our own consent, our own power. You know, pleasure can help us reclaim the slut narrative and the virginity myth, which are double standards we've been fed since birth. And I am an ex evangelical, and I was absolutely raised in purity culture and very, very harmful that I'm still detoxifying from, and raised with this myth of virginity as something that you lost, could never be restored, and very harmful. And then we wonder why we have so much shame, why we have trouble dropping into our bodies, why we find it hard to access pleasure. You are not alone, okay? You are freaking not alone. So, finally, the final point I will make, why we should adopt a pleasure practice. All of this inner work, this is really the thesis statement for me and like being a divine feminine self-love coach. All of this inner work that we're doing contributes to cultural shifts. It's not just about us, right? It's about everyone. It's about our children and their children. Um, and all of that work has to be met with compassion. It really does. And this is a quote from, again, Sonia Renee Taylor. She says, "Without compassion for ourselves, we will never stay on the road of radical self love. Without compassion for others, we can only replicate the world we have always known." Radical self love is not about getting it right. Getting it right is a body shame paradigm. Radical self love is honoring how we are all products of a rigged system designed to keep us stuck in stigma and shame. The only way to beat that system is by giving ourselves something the system never will: compassion. Hmm. I read those words and I cried because they're so true. Compassion is the ultimate uh, uh, the ultimate, what do I want to say? It's like the arch enemy of shame. Like they cannot coexist. This town is not big enough for the two of them. So if the shame is coming up, meet it with compassion. One great way to remember to do this is by remembering the shame is not you. It was fed to you, spoon fed. Um, you've been swimming in it, your whole life. This is not our natural state, and it's not your fault. I don't know. Like I need to hear that from time to time. Yeah, the shame is not your fault. It was given to you. It was sold to you. Um, but you didn't profit. They profited. A culture, a different society profited. Someone profited. So, compassion. Compassion, compassion, compassion. All right, dear ones. Well, we've come to the end of our time together. Just a reminder to sign up for January of Pleasure if you haven't already. It's going to be super fun. On Friday, we're going to circle together for our pleasure practice community. I'm so excited to hear how your practice is going, what shadows are coming up for you, where the resistance lies. Ooh, and if you want a little like sneak peek of some of the other sermon topics, we're going to do one on resistance to our pleasure on the fear, the dis safety, the unsafety. We're gonna do a sermon on that next week. I'm really excited. We're gonna get into it. Um, so yeah, sign up for January of Pleasure. I'll see you there. Create your own pleasure practice. If you're on my mailing list, you're gonna get some great tips on creating your pleasure practice on Thursday. And just explore, be curious, be playful, experiment. Remember, this is all fun and it's all for you and your healing. No one is going to be hurt by your pleasure practice. You know, no one's going to be harmed. And you're going to have breakthrough after breakthrough. I really do believe you will. Um, all right. I think that's it for today. And again, if you would like to be in some reciprocity with me and my work, you are more than welcome to make a donation for my free offerings, which include these sermons and January of Pleasure. I love you all. I'm sending you so much gratitude for being interested in this work, for helping me to be accountable to this work, and for helping us all shift shame culture. You know, we are doing it. Every time you claim your pleasure, you are shifting shame culture. So we all thank you. Um, and then, yeah, I'll see you. I'll see you Friday, or I'll see you next week for another sermon. Sending you all so much love. If anyone has any questions, you can also drop them here and I will just hang out. You can always watch the replays of the sermons on my YouTube channel and my newsletter. I send them out, and I do a podcast version on my SoundCloud. So sometimes you just want something to listen to, so that can be a good option. All right. Claire says, something I learned about beauty standards that really disrupted them for me was how they are really centered around looking young and fertile. Ugh, yes. Look at me, I can make you babies. Even shaved legs are just trying to make a mature woman into a girl. Oh, it's such a good point, Claire. It's so infuriating, isn't it? How infantilized women are. Um, yeah, and quite frankly, it's disgusting. So thank you for bringing that up. I don't know. Should I write? Maybe I'm gonna write down these social guidelines that I came up with today around sex. Because I was thinking, like, truly, if you could guarantee that sex was non-harmful, then what would be the need for shame? Shame is the kind of mechanism, shame and sin, the mechanisms by which our government, society, religion regulates sex. So what if we could just come up with a different social contract? And I'm sure there's great resources on this out there that I just haven't read. But I was like, yeah, if you could guarantee it wouldn't create harm, there wouldn't be imbalanced power dynamics, unwanted pregnancies, STDs. You could guarantee consent. If you could guarantee pleasure, oh my goodness, how would that change our society? How would that change you on an individual level? I think it's freaking fascinating. All right, precious ones, thank you for joining me. So much love to all of you, and go have a pleasure filled evening. You are worthy. Go claim it. See you soon. Bye.